Mainstream Metaphysics with your host, Nick Newmont.
Welcome to Mainstream Metaphysics. It is Tuesday night in Los Angeles, 6 o'clock on the West Coast. Hi, I'm Nick Newmont. Joining me tonight, special friend and guest Ken Klee. Ken, welcome.
Great to be here, Nick. Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you. If you are new to my show and you're watching for the first time, I am part owner of the Newmont Center for Balanced Living in Agora Hills. We are a multi-practitioner healing alternative therapy institution. We are over 3,000 square feet of healing space, classroom, retail space. And if you haven't been there, please come and visit us in Agora Hills. Love to show you around. I like the place. I have a lot of fun there.
It's a wonderful place.
Thank you. And, Mainstream Metaphysics is where we try to attach, the non-physical to the physical and the improbable to the believable. And I am, a healer, a clinical hypnotherapist, astrologer, numerologist, and, as my wife says, everything metaphysical. And this gentleman is a good friend of mine since about 2001, right?
Yep.
And we have studied together, worked together. We've done a lot with each other.
And had fun.
And a lot of dinners together with your family, my family. We get together with other friends and a lot of really, I have to tell you something, interesting stories, but a lot of sweet memories with this gentleman. And a couple brief announcements. I'm not going to belabor this. If you are in the Los Angeles area or you Zoom, on Sunday, February 18th, we are having a psychic event, a psychic panel with Sheena Metal, Kim Falcon, Mary Elizabeth, and myself. Will be available for private sessions after that. But we have a lot of events coming up at the center. Go to newmontcenter.net for more information to see what we do and how we do it. Ken, for my folks that haven't seen you on my show for a long time or have heard me speak of you in a legendary fashion, your story is quite fascinating because, you didn't wake up like me at 4 years old and say, things to our parents like, Mother, I wish to play with crystals. I wish to forgo education. We've gone through our lives, in other occupations. And you have been an incredible bankruptcy attorney, a partner in a major firm. You've had major impact on the bankruptcy codes in your history as an attorney. So now we flip around and you are a prolific healer, all these years, but I've got to know what caused you to get into that, to go from very intense legal work as you're involved in and all of a sudden embrace metaphysics and spirituality and ritual.
I think, Nick, it started when I was fortunate enough to work at a law firm that had a sabbatical program. Every 5 or 6 years, we get 3 months off. And I was able in 1983 to take my wife to Western Europe. And we had time to reflect on our life. And I just said, I have a blessed life. I have a little bit of pain and restriction in my back and neck. And wouldn't it be great if I could do something to get rid of it? So I just started looking around, wondering why I'd have, restricted movement. Of course, The doctors all said stress. But I didn't buy that because at that age, I was causing more stress than I was feeling by a long shot. So I started getting chiropractic and massage, and that led to acupuncture. And I'd get temporary relief from the back and neck pain, but it would come back.
Right.
And I kept wondering why, what's going on. So I tried different things, and fast forward to 1997, my partner's retreat in the law firm was at the San Ysidro Ranch. I signed up for a Reiki massage It wasn't Reiki at all. It was the Radiance Technique, authentic Reiki.
Right.
And it wasn't a massage. The woman never touched my body. She just put her hands around various places and moved them in different ways. And after an hour, I was in a blissful state. So I said to her, what did you do? And she gave a New Age answer about patterning cosmic symbols and invoking the whole light energy and being a catalyst and all this. And, most of me was thinking, lady, what do you think I'm smoking, right? But I didn't say that. I said, how can I learn how to do this? And I studied the Radiance Technique for several years and got all of the degrees in it. And that led me into pranic healing, which had a spiritual side, arhatic yoga. So at age 48 or 50, I start meditating, and it's like the sky opens. All this information starts downloading. That changed my life.
Right. That's fascinating that all of a sudden that experience, and enlightened you to all these other things. Because when you live and work in the kind of work that you do, which is so intense, and it is about, the physical world and how you engage that, and the good life that you've created for yourself. And ever since I've known you, you've presented yourself as a very happy person. Sometimes people get into this kind of work because of something that was traumatic or something that, was like they got hit by a lightning bolt. But yours was sort of a beautiful transition. Like you woke up out of a beautiful sleep. It's, I think I'll try more of this.
Well, actually, it's almost been like an invisible hand coming along. Mm-hmm. For example, I had a law partner's wife who recognized that I had healing powers and was going to be a magician. She introduced me to you. This was in the early 2000s.
Right. That's right.
Where did this come from? I had no clue. So anyway, it's been very amazing and unexpected.
Well, and you're a student. I'm a student. I mean, we continue to study, but I mean, you have studied a lot of things that I haven't, but I think you've taken almost every course I've ever taught too. Teach
that too.
Yeah. Easy for me to say. So, but when you are a student of a craft, the learning never really ends, whether you're formally in class or meditating or channeling or reading. You're very loaded with knowledge.
Well, but
so many levels.
That's what's so wonderful. Bright minds need fresh challenges.
Right.
And what you bring through, either through study or through intuitive flashes, is just wonderful.
Sure.
It makes life exciting.
And how do you, I'm not going to ask it that way, how do you receive messages from your spirit guides? What form, is there, or are there?
Gratefully. Okay. No, what happens is it's a fair question. The higher sensory perceptions unfold in many different ways. Many people are clairsentient. Fewer are clairaudient, which means they hear things from other realms. Fewer are clairvoyant, which means they see the subtle energies. Right. And fewer still are claircognizant. And that's just knowing things through direct perception.
Surely.
There are a lot of people who say they know things, but this is really knowing things. And I've been lucky enough to have the ability to have these faculties unfold. And it's a natural byproduct as you meditate and raise your vibration for these faculties to unfold.
Sure. And, people have asked me through the years, how do you develop these abilities, whether to be psychic or to, develop the healing abilities? And every answer is going to be the same. That's meditate. Learn a style of meditation that opens you up. And a lot of people, like I'm in the third week of that meditation and channeling course that I've been teaching for many years. And a lot of people come forward as they can't meditate, they have a problem meditating. And the way I teach it is to sort of come in the back door, but to allow those perceptors to open up.
That's one way of doing it. I like to say, get out of your head and into your heart. right?
True.
We overthink too much. The rational mind has limited capacity. It's not going to be able to go there. And so the true meditation, a lot of people think it's about quieting your mind, and that's a good first step, but that's not it.
Right. And people hear that. People hear that. In fact, when I first started teaching that meditation course, it was called the I Can't Meditate course. And when people hear quiet your mind, right away, there's I can't. So that's why I teach it in a different way. So the left brain is basically deactivated and the right brain is starting to do the work.
Yep, that's exactly what we need to do.
But it is meditation that opens everything up. And that's really the key. On top of it, meditation is just good for you.
Of course it is. It's wonderful.
And then there's all kinds of different kinds of meditations that people can do.
There are, but ultimately you want to get to a place where you can invoke the intuition at will.
Right.
That's really a good skill to have.
And even in the conscious state, you can shift your brain waves. Like if you're working on something, your left brain is engaged, you can step out of that and receive information on the intuitive level.
Yes. And I've been blessed to be able to oscillate quickly between the rational and the intuitive. And that ability to run and return across the corpus callosum in the brain is something that can be practiced and cultivated.
Surely. And that is, when I'm doing channeled work, like for instance, like I don't mean when I'm channeling Merlin through me, but when my spirit guides are talking and then I'm talking to someone else, I can feel myself go from here to here to here to here, back and forth. And I'm sane.
Sure.
I haven't lost my mind yet.
No, you're beside yourself.
I have been beside myself for some time. When we get into the type of healing work that you and I do, where we're working in the fifth dimension, and we do involve sound work, we do involve all the aromatherapies, incense, candles, and all that, but the use of crystals does come into play in most of the sessions that you and I do. And I'm going to ask you a question that I've never asked you in 20-some years. In working on people, okay, is there a favorite crystal that you like to employ in healing sessions?
Yes, there is. I like the sentient plasma quartz crystals because they have a tremendous high vibration. And if you set a grid with them, it can put a very comforting, protective space around the client on the table. Right. And so I love it when that grid comes out for someone.
Sure.
Whether it's at the first level or the second level, it's just a very nice, wonderful, powerful grid. I also like meditating with it. And it's a great tool to take things out of the field.
Right, exactly. In fact, I forgot when I came running in here, I have one in my car. I meant to have a large one of the sentients, one of those big quartz crystals from the Colombian Andes. Now, on a personal level, when it comes to crystals, for you, what's your favorite crystal?
Well, it depends what I want to use it for. I don't have a particular favorite. I have sentient plasma quartz that I meditate with every day, and I have some crystals that I've put special energies into to do different things. But I would say other than sentient plasma quartz, I really find labradorite attractive. I have different kinds of celestite that I use, and they have very different vibrations, and they're very wonderful for healing, particularly above the crown. Of course, everyone loves amethyst. I love amethyst and rose quartz, some of the more pedestrian crystals.
Sure.
I would say of the more exotic crystals, petersite is something that's come up from time to time. Charoite is something I love using. And then there are some of the really high vibration love crystals like rosalite that I enjoy quite a bit, and morganite. So I would say those are some of my real favorites.
When and they're all good. You have at your healing space, like I do, what we call the chakra plates. Where are they're normally made out of agate, and they are grids with crystals glued on there to polarize, a center point. and they are absolutely gorgeous, and they're for an aspect of a condition, or they're just for a particular chakra, root chakra, throat chakra, heart chakra. And how often would you say in a healing session you pull those out and place them on people?
Well, I check them in every session, but
Sure.
for me, they don't come out as often as they do for you. I would say they come out probably one time in 5 for me. But I also have a special plate that I use for the chakra below the feet, the so-called 8th chakra, and that comes out quite a bit when people have serious disease in the body, where we do the ritual with the great invocation to close that vortex.
Are you talking about the 8th or the 10th?
Oh, no, sorry, the 10th.
Okay.
The one below the feet.
Right.
Although sometimes the 8th is reversed too, but it's the 10th that's the serious one.
Right.
And then I also have plates that I've made for the different parts of theme of the Tree of Life. And I'll bring those out and put those in the Tree of Life, which is sort of like the chakra system, but a little different.
When it comes to the 10th chakra, or we call it the earth ball, that is about 3 feet below our feet in the earth.
Right.
And until COVID, 4 years ago, we would talk about that 10th chakra maybe 6 times a year. Okay, hardly ever. When you think of all the sessions you do and I do in a year. And since COVID, every other person that I've worked on, that thing is popped and leaking up into the physicality. So that's something that in the course, the primary course that I teach, the 10th chakra is now part of the course of action, and up until a few years ago, it wasn't. We never really talked about it. Now we have, a lot to go over with that.
Yeah, it's very important. That's why I mentioned in terms of the crystal plates that I use, that one comes up frequently.
How often do you find that you have to address that 10th chakra?
Probably not as often as you do, but certainly I would say maybe 3 times a week out of 10 healings that I do.
Well, that's 30%. That's significant.
It is significant
compared to years ago.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's something that atmospheric stuff, environmental stuff, is causing, and fear is causing this activity to sort of bubble up.
Yes, let's talk about fear.
Okay.
So we have nothing to fear about fear except that it's a natural response that people have.
Truly.
And it can cause terrible things to happen in someone's aura and in their health.
Right.
From my perspective, fear is really the absence of love. It's something where the rational mind is going out of the now into the future, looking at what can go wrong, and having an aversion to some of the possible responses. And if you believe these fears to be true and imbue the fear into energy, you can create little demonic forces that you find in the aura and that can settle in the kidneys or other parts of the body.
Right.
It's really something that people need to learn how to watch and deal with.
Well, when we speak in the primary mechanics of the chakras, as we learned many years ago, what blocks the chakras are negative thoughts, which could be one's own or projected in from the outside, and fear. And when I'm talking to a new client, as opposed to a practitioner like yourself who just understands it, I tell them that when there's fear in a chakra, it's like pouring acid into the chakra. It erodes it, because we are born of love and we're made of love. And there's love, truth, love and truth, fear and untruth. And so when people have a lot of fear in them, what's existing is untruth. And whatever that is not the reality. And what's the acronym for fear that's used in a lot of education? False education appearing real. So if there is fear in there, it's not something that's truly real.
No, it isn't real, in meaning that it doesn't have spiritual substance, but it can be an emotion that people sense, and they can have an aversion to, and they can believe it to be real. And that's the key. If they believe it to be real and react to it it can cause lots of pain and suffering.
And as for me, as a clinical hypnotherapist, I work with, in that work, trying to identify from people whether something is a fear or a phobia. Because a fear is more mental, where a phobia is something that they've actually experienced. And a person could have a fear and a phobia. So in the energy work that we do, then what happens is when it becomes fear and phobia, we address whatever chakra that is, so many times the second chakra, the sacral chakra, and we look for traumas that have been embedded in the timelines of the chakra.
That's right.
There's a lot of fancy language for how we describe chakras, but in simple terms, a chakra is a thought container. Everything that we've experienced is stored in there from birth all the way up to the present. You were going to say.
No, I was going to say I think it's a little more than that. I view them as astral organs, but they certainly do contain thoughts, and they don't have to be personal. It can be part of the group consciousness. I mean, look what's going on around the world right now. Right. The group consciousness is very, very heavy and fear-based for many reasons.
Right. And one of the things, because there's so much with the physical body that comes into play, and of the 7 traditional chakras, there are the 7 glands, the endocrine system. So the chakras, as they have an effect on those glands, I refer to the chakras at times as metaphysical glands.
Yeah, well, there you go.
So there's a lot of different ways with each client to use language or analogy that helps them identify with what we're doing, because if we speak too much metaphysicalese, then we are unintentionally speaking over their heads, which is not what we want to do, because in that kind of healing work, we want to make sure, like legalese, that we're speaking something that they can understand and how it does pertain to their reality.
Absolutely right.
Now, you mentioned a moment ago spirituality, and in today's world, it is a bit convoluted, okay, and sort of misunderstood by some, misportrayed by some. How have you seen that unfold? Because nowadays, wherein everybody engages in a lot of different kinds of practices and things like that, with projections that it's spiritual.
This is a great question that shows the problem of language and the use of language.
Right.
Now, what's spiritual to one person may be different than to another person. When someone dies and drops the body, they go into spirit form.
Right.
And if they come to visit as a guide, they can be a spirit guide. But I wouldn't say to someone that communicating with your spirit guides is spiritual. Now, does it involve interaction with spirits? Of course it does.
Right.
But that's not what I mean when I use the term spiritual. What I mean is getting in touch with the character that you're playing, recognizing it as a casing for an essence that is in this world but not of it, and teaching people how to access the higher self or true self or spirit, which comprises everything. And you can get to a place in meditation where you see the oneness of everything, not just as a thought matter or an experiment, not taking it on faith, but actually experiencing it. So for me, spirituality is getting beyond the ego, beyond the character that we're playing in the lifetime, and getting to a place where you encounter the true essence that animates what we believe we are.
And that is part of being completely in touch with truth.
Of course.
That's what it is. We have found, we teach a lot of classes at our center, and we work with a lot of different people. And what we're finding is that, and look, people are well-intended, and they want to get to where they want to get to. But there is this condition that we call a spiritual bypass. And that is, you're laughing, that is a proclamation of, I know that, I've studied that, I've read that, and it's sort of like, I'm that, but the person's life still looks like this. And that's a challenge, because you don't want to insult someone, of course, because what's the point of being in a therapeutic situation? But getting them to redirect back into owning what they believe they've studied and sort of bending that energetic curve so they can be more on track with themselves. Fortunately, and we've talked about this on other shows, I'm not into labeling, okay? I think that serves nothing in proclamations like that, and also when we're talking about therapy, using terminology that labels a person's condition of their psyche. I think that doesn't serve a person anything, and even if you're right about that, then they feel that they're pigeonholed and, well, I'm like that, what am I supposed to do? So we don't ever want anyone to feel hopeless like that. But getting people to be more in their truth and a touch in their heart, like you say, is what's more important.
Well, it is, because they become being rather than doing. And it's from beingness that you can then use the spiritual power and essence to change your vibration. So you can become a master of your vibration, which is really all you can really do as a human being, and make other people's lives more pleasant and enjoyable.
Sure. And it's not a competition.
Heavens no. Everybody unfolds at his or her own rate, and we're all here to help other people.
Exactly. Ken, in over the last few years, the people that you work on, what do you see as the most presented condition that people seem to need help with?
Well, the last few years, of course, have seen the wave of COVID.
Right.
And that's been unlike anything that we've seen before. I personally think it's a chemical biological weapon. It's a very quirky disease.
Right.
And so having to go in and deal with the different ramifications of it. And some people, they don't get it. Some people, it's very nothing. Other people, they get long COVID. And they can have long-term impairment of brain function or heart function or kidney function or lung function. And it can be quite serious. But things go in waves. And I think you've seen this in your practice over the years. You'll go weeks or months without seeing something, and then you'll get a slew of cases, all presenting themselves the same way.
Well, so that's an interesting topic. So let's bend the conversation that way. So is there something pervasive that gets into the consciousness where everybody picks up on that?
I would say it gets into the consciousness, and many people pick up on it. I don't think everybody does, but it can be a form of group contagion, if you will, or what they used to call group hysteria. And absolutely, it can become a condition du jour because it becomes part of the group consciousness.
So when you diffuse that in a person, okay, what's it take if that person feels better and they get into positive conversation with someone else? Can you or I reverse the trend?
Of course we can.
Okay.
It's you just need a critical mass. And so teaching people how to detach from the group consciousness and then changing the group consciousness is something that can be done.
When COVID hit and there were all those edicts that were put out about closing businesses and stay home and all that, because we're by what we are, a mental health institution, healing is that subtitle in there, we're deemed immediately as an essential business. So the Newmont Center never closed. And there were people that chose to do things via Zoom, and there were people that still came in. So we diffused fear right from the start. And the doors were open, we're here for you, all of that. And people had a choice. We wanted people to feel that they had a choice, that choice wasn't taken away from them. If they wanted to come in, inside and have the session live, we provided it. In that time we did clean a lot. We made sure that everything was cleaned and scoured and all that kind of stuff quite frequently, but there was never a problem. So because we never, I'm speaking mainly about Audrey and myself, we never bought into the fear. If anything, it was kind of like, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead.
Well, I wound up taking a different tack. I have a healing room in my house.
Yes, you do.
And I
Quite a
was
beautiful
also
one.
in the age bracket that was high risk. So I shut down my in-person healing classes. I did start to cultivate a Zoom practice of remote healing.
Right.
That was one of the real silver linings of COVID. The other thing I started to do was to broadcast satsangs, or spiritual downpourings, twice a month on Tuesday nights from 6 to 7. And it's still going after, 3.5 years? It's been a long, long time.
Right.
And I also decided to invest in a web page to take these recordings and compile a library so people could access it. In terms of the healing practice, I had a mentoring practice that I had to eliminate immediately because I couldn't justify a third body in the room. But I wore masks and the client wore masks, and for a while, that was the way it went. Now I still wear a mask, but the clients don't unless they want to.
Right.
And we do our meditations mostly outside, but if the weather's inclement, we do it inside.
Sure.
And I teach my classes outside in the summer, so I've tried to accommodate it. What I found the most remarkable thing about COVID is the deeply held entrenched views across a wide spectrum by many people, and the lack of tolerance for the difference in views. You know, this is a very, very quirky disease that affects people differently, but the lack of tolerance that we see in so many facets around the world really lit up in this particular area, and it became politicized too.
Yes, it did. And it remains that way. Well, there is, you and I have the luxury of having a lot of conversations about a lot of different topics. And the way we talk about different things, we just don't go and broadcast all that.
Right.
Because it's our conversations with each other. But there is a polarization that has taken place, and it is divided society. There's an intention to homogenize society. There's a lot of things that are going on that have become obvious. Maybe they weren't obvious 4 years ago, but they are now. And being able to unify people again is very important.
And being able to have them open to critical thinking, to hear points of views that they don't agree with, but can still engage in constructive critical thinking and rhetoric. I mean, we've got situations in some of the law schools where people don't want to hear opposing points of view. How are you going to be able to advocate for a client if you can't see both sides of a position?
Truly. Well, and something you just said about law school, Ken, until they start teaching critical thinking in schools as opposed to memorization, that's going to be a challenge. Teach people how to think. Ask who, what, where, why, how. Ask questions.
And teach how to solve it.
And teach how to solve it, not a memorization, of course. Our place, and everybody takes on the client load that they choose to take on. We're busier than ever. At our place, we have 4 full-time people. There's a handful of part-time people that are there. I say, look, I'm thrilled to be that busy. Have we gotten busier for the wrong reasons, so to speak? Yeah. Fear has driven people into anxiety and stress. There is a lot of what we call general anxiety disorder that's going on. But when we talk about, how to fix it, people have to learn anxiety coping mechanisms, which helps them deal with these situations that are being presented.
From my perspective, Nick, anxiety and worry are caused by not trusting that life's going to unfold just the way it is. Most people look at their ego, they look at their rational mind, they think life is supposed to be kicking up on a couch and watching TV or going to the beach and sipping Mai Tais. That's not why we're here.
Right.
We're here to learn lessons for our soul's growth. And so if you can trust that your life is unfolding just the way it should, and if a challenge comes your way, instead of saying, oh no, and having an aversion reaction, you say, what's the lesson here? Right. Why is this here? What am I supposed to be learning from this? Then life is a lot less anxiety-provoking,
right.
a lot less worry provoking.
And people, too, have to learn, and there's more about what you said that I do want to weigh in on, too. People have to learn through that to be more resilient. There's a lot of people that get knocked down and they feel like they can't get back up. Going to the school of hard knocks never killed anyone. Learning to go through challenges is actually good. Like when you're little, if you don't eat some dirt or cut yourself, your body has to learn how to process that bacteria.
The vine that struggles makes the best wine. I love good wine.
So do I. We have that in common.
Yeah. And we might love the struggle, too.
Well,
but you don't have to have anxiety and worry about it. You just have to look at it, figure out where it came from, where it's going, and what the challenge is. Why is this here?
A little trick question, not at you. You'll understand this. When people have come to me and said they don't meditate, they don't know how to meditate, they can't meditate, I've actually asked them, have you ever just sat and worried? And they're like, oh, yeah. I said, well, you know how to meditate. And they'll go, what? I go, worry is negative affirmation. If you can daydream and fantasize about something, which is very positive, all right, then that's a form of meditation. And if you sit and worry and ponder what's going to go wrong, that is a negative affirmative meditation, which will lead to the wrong result, the undesired result.
From my perspective, we spend most of our waking hours in a state of attention, where we're trying to control things. We reach out, we try to move things around, understand it, grasp it. And I think if we can switch and go from that active yang state into a yin state of awareness and let things come into us, that's how we can switch from attention to awareness and facilitate meditative states.
Well, one of the issues is the swing of the pendulum. And what I mean by that, well, you're talking about the yang state. There are people that are too far into the yin state. So there are a lot of people that are walking around right now that are in hypnosis. They're in a hyper-suggestible state. So you don't want to be too yang, as Ken just said, but you don't want to be too yin either. There needs to be a balance in the brain waves. So if something comes in, instead of worrying about it, like you were saying, be able to deal with that.
Yes, and in the body, we have techniques that we do to balance the yin-yang energies.
Absolutely. Look, when we get into how we feel the aura, and if you use a pendulum once in a while, you can tell when the body is more to the right or to the left. And we do have ways of balancing out that. And one of the ways that we do it in the energy work is tightening the hara line, which is the line of intentionality. And if we are less intentional, this thin tube, this line of light that begins about 3 feet above our head, going down through the body at key points, all the way into the core of the earth, it's supposed to be very tight. And I've said to a lot of my students through the years, unless you're a monk in the hills of Tibet, where all you do is meditate and you don't have a regular life, that hara line is going to bend because we are pulled in different directions in life. But if we're pulled too much, then we're less intentional. When we hold our intentions, we're going to stay true to the self.
Yes, that's true.
And people's heart lines are like that Christmas ribbon candy. They're all over the place.
That's why at the end of every session I straighten and tighten it.
Yes, we do. We do that. Ken, I'm very fortunate in the years that you and I have worked on each other. I say this with all due respect. I trust you implicitly because I don't let anyone else work on me in that kind of session. Well, why would I? But no, you really tap into and see things on a lot of different levels.
Well, we all have things that we see and do
Right.
the best we can. That's all we can do.
Exactly. And we are, and as high level as that energy work gets, we are still human in all of this.
Sure. We have our own issues, our own hang-ups, our own countertransference. Absolutely right.
So how do we were talking about spirituality, and you and I have discussed something that happened years ago with a former colleague, let's just say, that had an unfortunate, painful demise, but there was a lot of judgment in that individual.
A lot of judgment.
So what happens, Ken, when a person wants to go down what seems to be a very healthy spiritual, metaphysical path, but how do they end up in judgment? What goes awry?
What goes awry is that they have too much severity and projection of what somebody should be doing. So one of the worst things you can do is to should on somebody.
Right.
And this is a hardwired part of the rational human mind. We all have these shortcuts and boxes and views of right and wrong.
Right.
And even if we're sincerely looking at somebody else's best interest, we have a view of what they should do.
Right.
Should this young person go to this island with this condition? Should this person choose this institution or that institution? Should this person be taking a mushroom trip or an ayahuasca journey,
right,
or whatever? We impose our judgment. We may do it out of concern, but we're making judgments. And of course, the scripture says, "Judge not, lest ye be judged."
Right.
Or, "Judgment is mine, saith the Lord." Because of everything that's happened in previous incarnations and things that we don't know about, things happen for reasons that we only see a little bit of, even if we're highly developed in our spiritual faculties. So it's very, very natural to want to judge. It's really a mistake. And in terms of the Sphirot, you have loving kindness off the right shoulder in Hesed, and judgment and severity off the left shoulder in Gevurah. The people who tend to pile on the judgment are heavily based on their left shoulder, and often they'll present with left shoulder pain in the scapula or in the actual physical shoulder.
Right.
So one of the things you can do is to rebalance the tree of life and these Sphirot, bring in a little more loving kindness, a little more compassion, a little more forgiveness.
How often now we're getting advanced, but you work on the tree of life, I work on the tree of life. How often do you find that the tree is flipped?
I would say probably 1 or 2 times a week to see it flipped. I mean, it's out of balance frequently, but to see the actual flipping of the Sphirot where they're either left, right, or upside down for a bipolar person, I only see it a few times a week.
Yeah, and I see them both. People ask all the time, like, what flips that? Why does that happen?
Well, a lot of it comes from the mind, but some of it can come from external trauma. What happens is, in addition to flipping, the pillar of mercy can be folded into the pillar of severity. It can just all fold into that left side.
Right.
With a bipolar person, they can be flipped by just a little bit of a catalyst or a suggestion or some kind of a trigger, and the whole tree can flip upside down. So different things in different people.
How often do you get clients that have diagnosed psychological disorders?
I don't know, because I don't ask them if they have diagnostic psychological disorders. If they want to volunteer it and they put it on their chart, they do.
Right.
But it's not something I ask. I'm not a medical doctor,
right,
and I like to deal with people where they are. I've seen people that have multiple personalities and that have fractures in their personality from traumas. I've seen people with inherited traumas and past life. But as far as a disorder, is this person narcissistic? Is this person schizophrenic? I don't go there.
Right. Well, you and I are not diagnosticians.
Right.
By what we do, we don't have those degrees. We're not supposed to do that. But sometimes people do come in, and in looking at the aura, you can see things in the aura that tell you that there is something that is not, the way it should be.
Sure, and you can see somebody, for example, if they're behaving like a borderline personality, you can use that label to explain to them the push-pull in their life and what causes it, right, to help them understand it so that they can go get therapy from somebody.
As we move forward, where do you see the kind of work that you and I do going? When you look into your crystal ball.
I'm very excited about it. I think there's going to be an uplifting and awakening in human consciousness. I think already in the 20 plus years I've been doing this, this kind of work has been much more accepted into mainstream medical practices and
Sure.
wellness practices. I've often thought that the missing link is to be able to quantify the blockages that we see. So I can look off your left shoulder and say, oh, in your etheric field here, there's a block, and I can show it with a pendulum. Doctors aren't going to buy that.
Right.
But if I can take a wand that's hooked up to a computer and wave it here and have some needle register the blockage, and then take a crystal or my hand and take it out and have it show flatline change, then they've got to pay attention. And it'll be susceptible to their regime of double-blind testing. And that, they take everything from their regime and put the burden of proof on us. I can live with that, but we don't have that apparatus yet. And until that's developed, I think the mainstream scientific and medical community is going to be skeptical and opposed to this. It threatens their whole worldview.
Well, it does, because when you say that we don't have that device, but you and I do have that device.
Well, sure. It's not an electronic device that registers on a computer. It's our hand chakras. It's our third eye. It's our knowing. It's our clairsentience. And, of course, the pendulums we use, or the dowsing rods, show it.
Right. I mean, there are times that I have said to a client, I sense this, and I want you to go get it checked. And when they went to the actual doctor, that was actually going on.
Of course. That happens all the time.
So instead of us telling the doctor what to do, we're sending the client there with that information, seeking, advice and treatment. And, we sort of triangulated a little bit, but at least we got them to get treatment for something that may be where an actual doctor, needed to come into play.
Oh, sure. I think doctors are terrific at setting broken bones and cutting out things out of the body that need to be cut out, and things like this. They have mastered some very fine arts in medicine, and I'm not opposed to doctors, but many of them only look at the physical body as the beginning and the end of who we are. And that's such a fundamental error in my view that I actually feel sorry that they're not more open to looking at some of the subtle bodies that can actually contain the source and cause of the physical disease that they're trying to treat.
Well, and there's even today, there's a certain level of pushback against what we call body syndromes, where an emotion has triggered the failure of a body part or a condition in the body. And when you like the course that Audrey and I teach called Healthy Mind, Healthy Body, we go through that. We have guest speakers every week, and there's incredible books on the topic.
I think the New York Times just came out with an article a few days ago saying that science has begun to recognize that much of the pain is caused from the mind. It's not actually in the body. Now, of course, you break a bone, you're going to have physical pain.
Right, of course.
But a lot of what people experience as their pain is coming from the mind and its reaction to a nervous impulse and a stored trauma. And if you release the trauma, which is what we do in our energy healing practice, then the pain goes away immediately. And if you've got just a simple pattern, it doesn't come back. If there's systems or other things, you got to take those out. But it can result in tremendous relief for people.
I had a situation with a client a handful of years ago, and there was a process that we do where we elevate the vibration of the chakra and actually get into the DNA helix and smooth that out. And this gentleman who's 40-something is working on his third chakra, the solar plexus, which is also the conscious mind, beyond all the stomach organs and digestion. And when I went in and I was smoothing that out, I asked him, I said, so what happened when you were around 12 years old? And the chakras are electromagnetic devices. And so he said, oh, yeah, we had to move from the country in our big house into the city. And I said, okay. And then he started to remember. And as I'm moving up, doing this with my finger, he realized that he had stored a trauma where, because they moved from this farmhouse and moved to an apartment, they had to get rid of their dog. Well, when he said, oh yeah, and I had to get rid of my dog, he remembered, and that chakra ignited. And I tell you, I felt like I had been tased. And that's how much energy is in your chakras. It's real electromagnetic energy. And it's like, I mean, you've all accidentally touched a socket when you shouldn't have, and that momentary paralyzation that goes on. Well, that's what I experienced inside that man's chakra. So your chakras are very powerful. So anyway, when traumas are stored in there and they are acknowledged, activated, and released, it's amazing what can take place. Like, for instance, another story is Audrey's friend Robin from Florida. This story has been told many times, and came to visit. And I heard of this woman, but I had only been with Audrey a couple months. And she was a very kind of quiet, sullen individual. And she told Robin, you need to have a session with Nick. So I get into her second chakra, which we usually get into people's second chakras because there's so much. And I just went there and I said, at that time, I said, 12 years ago, you had a miscarriage. You basically repressed it and forgot about it. And that's why you've been depressed all this time. And she just lit up and she goes, oh my God, yes. Well, that was one of those sessions that was cathartic, because the rest of the night, we all went out to dinner. Her sister and her mother went, who is this person? What did you do to Robin? And it's because a trauma that had been buried in there got released completely.
Exactly.
So there's so much that we can get into and help people with. I have a tendency not to say the word heal, because we're not really healing anyone. We're assisting them and activating and things like that. I had a tendency to stay away from that phraseology, because the individual does the healing. We're just assisting. So in the time that we have, I'm going to change conversation, and this is where I want you to run with this. We are roughly, depending on how you calculate it, in the age of Aquarius now. I mean, every astronomer, everybody's got a different point in time of when it happened, going to happen, but we can feel it. And there is a lot of disruption in the planet right now. And ages happen every 2,000 years. So we're living in a time, this Aquarian energy is polarizing us, but you take that and run with it.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I really am very optimistic that there's going to be a major quantum shift in human consciousness for the better. And there could be fallout as people who can't accommodate that leave the planet. But I actually think that intuitive levels, ways of being, ways of seeing things are going to change dramatically over the course of the next few years. And it's just my own personal feeling about this energy and what I've seen coming. And I think it will be a wonderful, great awakening. Mm-hmm. People will become conscious that the characters that they're playing isn't who they are, that there's really a much higher connected energy that they're part of. And so instead of treating another person badly based on separation and competition and lack, they'll look at the other person and see them as an aspect of themselves, or feel it or know it. And it'll lead to very different ways of behavior and insights.
Right. Well, the energy around what we know to be Aquarius is humanitarian and revelations and illumination. But I think that based on that song and play back in the late 60s caused everyone to think that there was sort of this hippie kind of experience that hasn't happened, which was a perception way back then in the late 60s.
Well, that was the dawning of the age of Aquarius, as the song says.
Right.
Hasn't happened yet.
It hasn't happened yet.
The darkest hour is just before the dawn,
Right.
says another song.
Right. And that's portrayed in the Tarot and the Ten of Swords, where there's light and then there's all that dark that's hanging right there. Look, because Aquarius is ruled by Uranus, which is the planet of sudden change, and there is a level of turmoil as we're venturing in these years now into the Aquarian age, the boat is going to rock.
Has to. All quantum shift takes a buildup of energy and then there's a leap. That's the way it works. Physics shows us that.
Exactly.
So if you're talking about electrons jumping from one ring to another, the scientists go, of course, that's what happens. Apply it to our everyday life. Oh, how can we do that? Well, guess what? This is a microcosm of a macrocosm. And these laws and principles apply across different media.
Ken, as we go into this time of revelation and connection to spirit and awareness of non-physicals, how do you feel about the reveal that has to do with extraterrestrials, physical beings that are not from here?
Well, I've always thought it unusual that an intelligent human being would think that with the vast number of galaxies and stars and planets in this manifest universe, that we are the only intelligent life form. I mean, my gosh, on our own planet, we've got whales and dolphins that might be smarter than some people we know.
Mm-hmm.
So some of us have encountered extraterrestrials. Some of us have seen the extraterrestrial evidence in some of the great technologies and books and learnings that have been taught in languages. And my guess is it will become a more commonplace experience. I think the governments of the world have evidence of extraterrestrial life that they're not releasing because they don't want people to go into a panic.
Right.
But I think we've had it in movies for so many years that people will be okay with it.
I've gotten to the point where I really believe that what's in the movies that is deemed as science fiction is really a different way of telling a story that's based on reality. I don't know how much more, unless it's absolutely ridiculous, but I think there's a lot of truth that's revealed through what's portrayed as science fiction.
Well, and it can be a way to condition the human consciousness so that when the events unfold, people aren't as shocked and crazed as they otherwise might be.
Well, when we get into video games and virtual realities, at what point do people have a hard time separating reality from virtual?
Well, you can describe this whole lifetime that way too.
Well, is this whole thing imagined and therefore we believe we're existing in that? I mean, that's something to ponder.
It's something to ponder.
Right. And that probably is fodder for another appearance for you on this show, because we're running out of time. Now, Ken, for those of the people that are watching that don't know you, if they would like to have a session with you or talk to you, how do they get in touch with you?
Well, I have a cell phone, and I have a website. The website is www.kleeministry.org, and the email is info@kleeministry.org. I have a high demand for my sessions. I've got about a 7-month backlog. I'm booking now toward the end of September. And so I do have a wait list, and sometimes the universe opens up cancellations if it's meant to be. But unfortunately, and I'm not proud of this, a lot of people have to wait a long time to get a healing session. I do have these satsangs that I do twice a month that are open to the public. Anybody can tune into them, and they're recorded. So if 6 o'clock Tuesday night isn't convenient for them, they can look at it at some other time. And I do it by donation. I don't have a fixed fee for people to attend it. So there's that. And I teach a few classes a year. So those are the different possibilities.
Exactly. Well, good. So, and if you have questions about tonight's show, you can write into me here on my Facebook page, or my email is nnewmont@gmail.com if you would like more information. We have hit the top of the hour, so we have to say goodbye. Thank you so much
for
coming
Nick.
on.
Always a pleasure.
It is a pleasure. We'll have many more fun conversations, I'm sure. And for those of you that have watched, from Ken's audience, my audience, thank you so much. Remember, tomorrow night, my wife Audrey does Conscious Mind Tripping at 6 p.m. here on her Facebook page, and this is presented here through the studios of Conejo Valley Talk Radio in the heart of Westlake Village, California. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next week back here, and as always, take care of yourself, take care of each other. See you next week. Good night, everyone.